Hello folks, I'm Trev Makes It Easy, the channel where we make learning easy. In this series, Trev on Econ, I'll be taking you through topics you're likely to run into in any introductory course in economics at the college or university level. My goal is to make economics less scary, more approachable, and, if I can, mildly enjoyable. With that being said, let's make it easy. All right, folks, we're finally here. We're finally at the final video for demand and supply before we can start branching off into micro topics and macro topics. This video is going to be kind of a mixed bag. We're going to be doing some tips, some tricks, and some examples with math to make sure we've covered any sort of weird remaining things that can help make your life a little easier. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go through an example problem and talk about the steps that I would use to work through any sort of demand and supply problem. So I'm going to make up an event here. We're going to make it a double event, just spoiler alert, but we're going to say your income, let's make it a little more obscure. You have been promoted and are now earning more money than before. At the same time, the number of stores selling this product has decreased. We are looking at wine, which is a normal good. What happens to the P and Q equilibrium? Okay. This is a very standard style of double movement question. I'm doing specifically double movements because anything we do here is also applicable to single movements, so we might as well start as hard as we can so that the easier stuff is just that easier. So you'll notice here there's a lot of words, and our job is to basically strip out the words from the word problem. So over the years, I've come up with this kind of series of steps that I think works really well for solving these types of things. The first step is identify the events in the problem. Okay, so in our problem, there's a couple things going on. Event one is promotion with more money, right? Paraphrasing. And event two is less stores selling. Okay, and we can tell that because it's pretty linear in terms of this happened and this happened, so what? Now, with these two events, at this stage, you can do two things. You can either move on to step two, which we'll talk about, or what a lot of people sometimes like to do is they like to try and map these to the 10 things we talked about, the 5 demand factors, the 5 supply factors. It's not a bad idea. However, it's not my favorite. We're going to do it here, but you could probably skip this step. So less stores selling, if you scan through your 5 demand, 5 supply things, you'll know this is a number of sellers event. And the first one, promotion with more money, this is a change in income event. All right. Now, they will never, or not never, they don't have to fit nicely into these categories, which is why I don't say these are necessary, but maybe helpful starting out. So once you've identified the problems or the events, the next thing you're going to do is determine if the event changes demand or supply. Basically, you're going to look at each event and say, is this a demand issue or is this a supply issue? Now, up here, this kind of solves it for us, right? Because we were able to match it to these different things, that basically does it for us. However, we can also just mentally figure it out, right? One of them is stores selling. Well, selling is clearly going to be a supply issue, right? We're literally talking about sellers. So it's got to be a supply issue. And one thing is that we know that in double event problems, if one thing is supply, the other thing has to be demand. We can actually leverage that. It's a nice little trick there that if you know one, you know the other is going to be the opposite. So I don't have to think about this one. I know it's going to be a demand issue. just to lock that in, why is it a demand issue? Well, it's a change in the amount of money you're getting. The amount of money you have is going to change how much you are willing to buy, right? So you're probably going to buy more or less depending on some other factors. So again, what I would say is, pro tip, if there are two events, one is demand and one is supply. Okay? Very unlikely to have two demand or two supply. Okay? So again, if you know one, you probably can just guess the other. It's not always true. I don't want to like have someone comment being like, my teacher did this. This is just very common. It's not perfect. All right? So once you know what they're affecting, your next step is, okay, determine if the event shifts the curve left or right. Okay, so again, event 1, promotion with more money. Okay, now be careful, because remember, change in income was one of those events that we had to be a little careful of, because not only did we have to care about whether income went up or down, we had to care about normal or inferior good. So in this example, income is increasing and we have a normal good, right? We said in the text that wine is a normal good. So therefore, is demand going to shift right or left? Well, it's going to shift right. So we'll just say demand shift right. For event 2, right, less stores selling. Well, if less stores are selling, that just means there's less supply. And how do we show less supply? Supply shift left, right? And then finally, step 4 is just draw it, right? Draw out that picture. So again, pretend we're from a blank worksheet. I'm going to go, okay, here's my graph. Again, I'm going to be a little lazy here and not label everything, because on tests you might be strapped for time. So there's my starting point. I would again recommend quickly mark out your equilibrium just so you don't get lost. Okay, but I don't need to put P, Q, D, S unless they ask for it. So I know that demand shifts right, so I can do that. Demand shifts right. I know supply shifts left, so I can take my supply, shift it left, and then my new equilibrium is up here. We dot it out, and we say, oh, I can see an increase here, down here, I don't know, so P increases, Q ambiguous. All right. That is it. That is as hard of a question probably as you're likely to see with demand and supply at an introductory stage. We can definitely make these topics more complex, but that's for much later videos and later courses. All right. Now, this is what I would call a full problem. All right. They might not ask you to go all the way through. They might just say, here's an event. Is it demand or supply? Here's an event. Does it shift the curve left or right? It might just go part way down. Okay, but this is the whole series of steps you would follow to get the whole thing figured out. Okay, again, do you have to follow this template? Absolutely not. Does this template help you understand the progression and sort of the steps you could take to solve a problem? Yeah, it's really good for making sure you cover all your bases and that you're not missing anything, which again, handy especially when you're starting out. Now, as I've said before, this is a great tool for AI, right? Have AI make you some single event problems, some double event problems, go through these steps and make sure you understand why those changes are occurring and make sure you're practicing. All right, just like any math course, you want to practice this stuff. It will not stick otherwise. Okay. So that's tip and trick number 1. The next thing I want to show you is a nice way to remember what happens to P and Q without having to draw the graphs every single time. This is something I came up with a few years back because my students were struggling with the graphs. So I came up with this kind of neat method to basically figure out P and Q without memorizing all the graphs or without having to draw the graphs. And it works pretty well. So the way this works is you have to only know 2 things. Okay. You have to know 2 basic events. So we set up a little chart like this, and we've got the movement, we've got what happens to price, and we've got quantity. Okay. So you'll remember, hopefully, from what we talked about last time and the time before that, there's basically 8 movements. There's 4 singles and 4 doubles. So our single movements, we are going to learn demand increase and supply increase. Okay. For this method to work, these are the 2 you have to memorize. Okay. So we're going to pretend like you've already memorized these. If you haven't, don't worry. Just this method might work for you if you like that. So in demand increases, when we did our picture, you can go back and watch that video. We know that price goes up and quantity goes up. And we know that when supply increases, price goes down and quantity goes up. Okay. For this method, you're going to memorize these. All right. You have to at least memorize these 2. And the reason is we can use these 2 to solve for the other 6. All right. So if you're ever in a jam and you're like, ah, crap, I don't remember what happens when demand increases and supply increases. If you know these 2 things, you can solve for all of them. Let me show you. So the next 2 are fairly simple. We still have to do D decrease, and we have to do supply decrease. Okay. So how do we do those? Well, these ones are fairly straightforward because these are just the opposite of what you memorized. Right? So if I know that demand increase is up, up, I know demand decrease without thinking is down, down. And then if supply increases down, up, supply decreases up, down. So see, I've just done the opposites. I flipped them. Okay. Not so bad. Where this becomes very helpful is the next set. The next set is the ones that people don't like, and that is the double movements. So our double movements are D increase, S increase. Then we have D decrease, S increase. Then we have D increase, S decrease. And then we have, well, I was actually spaced out pretty well. D decrease, S decrease. Okay. These are the ones that made the messy graphs that we didn't really know what to do with, and they kind of got out of hand. Again, you should still know them, but this is my little shortcut to make things easier. Okay. For these 4, what you're going to do is this. Okay, this one requires a bit of explanation. Look at the 2 single movements that make up the double movement. Okay, so for example, D increase and S increase. Well, that's D increases up here, S increases up here. It's our 2 blue ones, right? Totally fine. What you're going to do is compare the P's. If they are the same direction, that's the direction. I should say compare the P's and Q's. Okay. If they are not the same direction, that's ambiguous. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at DNS for DNS increase. So here's our two single movements up here. All right. Let's look at what happens to price. Well, one of them says price should go up. One of them says price should go down. So those are not the same direction. So this one is going to be ambiguous. However, if we look up here, right, their quantities, they are the same direction. So guess what? This one is going to go up. Okay. Again, if you like challenging yourself, you can pause the video here and try and do the other 6, but we'll do them together nonetheless. So the next one is D decreases, so that's this here, and S increases, that's this here. Okay. Look at what they do for price. They both have price going down. So I know that when I put them together, price goes down. However, look at their quantities. One says up, one says down. They don't agree, which means this is ambiguous. Keep going. Demand increase, S decrease. Well, they agree on price. They think price should go up, and they disagree on quantity. So I know that this is going to be up, and this is going to be ambiguous. And then finally, both decreasing. Well, they don't agree on price, so this is an A. And they think quantity should go down, so this is down. And all of a sudden, I have solved the outcomes for all the graphs without drawing the graphs. I only had to know this piece up here, and I'm able to solve for all the rest of them. This is a very handy test-taking tactic where once you start your test, you can write out this little chart, solve for the pieces you're missing, and then all of a sudden, you basically have a cheat sheet on your test of the directions that all the outcomes go. This means if they ask you about a specific movement, you don't necessarily have to draw it anymore because you have the answers written down. It's a very handy little tool. You do have to practice setting it up, but if you practice setting it up, I promise you, it makes a lot of demand and supply stuff a lot easier and a lot quicker, which again, in a test-taking environment, can be very handy. All right? Try this out yourself. I promise it's useful. The last thing I want to cover here is a math problem. So occasionally, instead of giving you the graph, they will give you equations. So they might give you something like QD is equal to 100,000 minus 1,000 P. And then they also give you the equation of supply, and they say, well, QS is actually equal to negative 20,000, but plus 3,000 P. Okay? And they'll say something like, find equilibrium P and Q. Now, some people this stresses out. If you're not a math person, you hate seeing equations, especially ones with somewhat large numbers. Don't worry, the actual math behind it is fairly straightforward. Okay? What we're going to do is all we have to do is put the equations together. Okay? So remember, at equilibrium, QD equals QS. Okay? So even though QD and QS are not the same variable, which means, oh, I shouldn't be able to put those together. At equilibrium, they are the same variable. So all I have to do is I'm going to take all the green stuff, the 100,000 minus 1,000p, and I'm going to have that equal to the red stuff, negative 20,000 plus 3,000p. Right? Easy enough. All we need to do now we isolate and solve for p. Okay? Now, technically, I put it as QD equals QS equals. They could put it as P equals and P equals, and then you would just do the same thing, but you'd be solving for Q first. Again, the process stays the same. Put the equations together, solve for whatever variable's left. All right? So just quick math here. All we're going to do, I'm just going to change to blue. I've got the 100,000. I'm going to pull this 20,000 over so that it's plus 20,000 now. And that's going to be equal to the 3,000p that was there, now plus 1,000p. And again, all I've done is basically taken this and moved it over, taken this, moved it over, and again, just changed my signs. Okay, basic algebra stuff. The math doesn't get too complicated in first year econ, but this sometimes trips people up. All we do now, throw them together. So that's 120,000 equals 4,000p. All right, we divide. So 120,000 divided by 4,000 equals p. So p is going to equal what? Well, p is going to equal 3,000. Just to show you. Oh, you might want to see my calculator. 30, right? My mental math is bad on the best of days. So 30 is my price. Okay. The next thing I have to do, so all we're going to do now is sub this back into each equation to find Q and check your work. Okay. Now, technically, you would only have to put it into one, but if you're not strong in math, you should put it into both. So why do I say that? Well, let's put it into one. So QD equals 100,000 minus 1,000 times 30. All right. So that's going to be equal to 100,000 minus 30,000, which is usually 70,000. Okay. And we'd say, oh, I'm done. That's the answer. Price is 30, quantity is 70. Cool. If you're not that comfortable, I would quickly just plug in the other one as well, and you'll see why. So if I do QS minus 20,000 plus 3,000 times 30, well, again, that's going to give me negative 20,000 plus 90,000, which is going to give me, oh, look, 70,000. If these two match, A, I know I've done it right, and B, I don't have to question myself at all. All right? Now, again, practice this. It will likely come up. One tip I will give you, be careful if this is in multiple choice. Okay? Make sure you're answering in the right order. Okay, what I mean by that is if the question is P is da-da-da-da-da and Q is da-da-da-da, you need to make sure, if option A is, I don't know, 70,000 and 30, and option B is 30 and 70,000, right? Make sure you're picking the one that goes in the right spot. So in this case, the answer would be B, because 30 is the price, 70,000 is the quantity. It's a very easy mistake to make, and you don't want to be making that mistake at the end of the game like this. The other kind of shortcut or pro tip I'll give you here is that if you don't know how to do the math, One thing you can do is just plug these numbers into the equations and see if they work. If they do, that's the answer. I don't recommend that as it can be a little time consuming, but it's a good fallback if you really don't know what it is you're doing. All right. That wraps up demand and supply finally. So for that means that we've covered everything that you should have to know for an average introductory course in either economics, macro or micro, for demand and supply. This is a very meaty section of any course, and I do recommend that you go review these videos again because they will form a very strong foundation for a lot of the later stuff we talk about. Going forward, whenever I bring up demand and supply, I'm going to assume you already know the fundamentals, so make sure you have those fundamentals locked out. With that being said, here is where we branch off. You'll start to see some videos on micro, some videos on macro, so keep an eye out and make sure you're watching what is relevant to you. Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Well, folks, that wraps up another lesson for today. I hope it was helpful. If you found the video valuable, please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions about the content or requests for other topics or subjects you'd like me to cover, please leave a comment below. Until next time, keep learning and make it easy.